everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from Blood Incantation, Hidden History of the Human Race. This is the second album from these guys, a newer act in death metal, and overall they're one that I've found to be quite enjoyable in the past. I know they don't have quite a ton of material released prior to this album, but I thought that their debut record back in 2016 was a really enjoyable piece of old school inspired death metal. I feel like the band struck a nice balance between being clearly inspired and influenced by a lot of the classic death metal bands out there, but at the same time doing their own thing on that record as well. I feel like the compositions on that record were really great. I feel like all the songwriting was really engaging. I feel like the band's aesthetic on that record was also fantastic too. So coming into this new record, I was really excited to see what the band was going to do with their second full-length release. And on this release, Blood Incantation topped their previous record and released a really fantastic piece of death metal here. In fact, I would even go as far as to say this is one of my favorite death metal releases of the decade. It's just really that entertaining and fun to listen to. On this record, you get only 4 tracks. However, I feel like each song on this thing gets a lot done in its runtime. The shortest songs here are about 5 minutes or so in length, and the longest cut on this thing is about 18 minutes in length, being a pretty lengthy and multifaceted track. And like I said, there's a lot going on in these songs, and I really appreciate that every track on this thing has its own unique personality and has its own unique goals that it wants to accomplish, but at the same time they all come together to make a really consistent and cohesive overall album experience. The opening track to this record, Slave Species of the Gods, is a fantastic opener to this thing. I love the aggressive playing here on this track and the nasty vocals as well. I'd probably say it's the most normal sounding out of all the songs on this thing, the most typical, but even despite that fact, I still think it's a great opener just for the amount of energy that it brings and a lot of the fantastic riffs and songwriting present here on this track. It's still probably my least favorite song on the entire record, but not because it's a bad song by any means, just because I feel like every song that follows is just even better somehow than this opening track. But yeah, overall, it's a great opener to this project, just a really solid death metal cut. And with the following track, the Giza Power Plant, the band experiments with a bit of a longer song structure here, about 7 minutes or so. I love some of the melodic portions here of this track that kind of slow things down. Some portions of this song and its instrumental can sound even beautiful at times, but in a kind of weird, spacey, kind of weird way, where it almost seems like the band is trying to tap into this kind of weird, almost sci-fi-like atmosphere, which certainly might be the case given that a sci-fi atmosphere is kind of what the band has been trying to invoke on a lot of their material, clearly this album included, as I'll talk about a bit more later on, but I feel like the band really nails down that kind of mystical, otherworldly feel that you might expect from an album called, Hidden History of the Human Race, and on a track talking about, the Giza Power Plant and other songs on this record talking about things like aliens and gods and all of that stuff. It fits that atmosphere really nicely, and overall I think the Giza Power Plant is a track where the band is at their best on the record. Honestly, this is probably my favorite song on this thing. The riffs are really aggressive, really pounding. Other portions of the track sound really beautiful, but in a kind of off-kilter way. The vocals are fantastic too. Just a phenomenal death metal track, one of my favorites of the year for sure. On the record's third song, Inner Paths to Outer Space, this is an instrumental track that sees the band experimenting a bit more with some of the sounds and ideas that they toy around with. Once again, that very spacey, otherworldly feel the band pulls from several other portions of this album comes into the focus here on this track. I feel like this is a really engaging instrumental throughout its runtime. It's certainly not instrumental fluff or anything like that by any means, just a really fantastic instrumental song through and through. Definitely adds a lot of atmosphere to this record, and yeah, it's fantastic. You do also on this track have towards the end of it what sounds almost like some growled vocals coming in. I don't believe that they're saying anything that's actually like meaningful, which is why I'd still classify this as like an instrumental track, but I feel like this growl or whatever it is that's worked in towards the end of this song sounds really creepy and otherworldly, and it just pairs up really nicely with the atmosphere already going on in the rest of this song. And then the final track on the record is the one that's about 18 minutes in length. However, its length is certainly warranted, as there's a bunch going on in this song that keeps the song constantly entertaining. This track's name, by the way, is Awakening from the Dream of Existence to the Multidimensional Nature of Our Reality, a super long song title for a super long track. Not sure if that was done intentionally or not, but I find it kind of funny either way. But this song itself is one that's really fantastic in my opinion. Like I said, there's a lot going on here in this track. Throughout the song's entire runtime, the band is constantly shifting and morphing the sound of this track to keep things interesting. You'll have portions of the track that are just straightforward, aggressive, visceral energy, but you'll have other moments of the track that are trying to be a bit more spacey, a bit more atmospheric, clearly a bit more melodic, once again pulling from that otherworldly feel that I mentioned previously that keeps these portions of the track sounding kind of off-kilter, a bit creepy, even though they're not, super aggressive or in your face or anything quite like that. For a song as lengthy as it is, the band certainly puts a lot of effort into keeping this track sounding very varied and just consistently enjoyable throughout. I feel like the structuring of this track is one that's very dynamic. I can clearly see how the band was trying to hold my attention by having moments of aggression paired up with moments of some more quiet sounds and more melodic moments. It's just really enjoyable, I guess, overall is what I'm trying to say. The way they structure this track is really interesting. It certainly is going to hold your attention despite the fact that this thing is pretty lengthy. And overall, it makes for a very fantastic and massive conclusion to this album. The lyrics here on this record, when you go and read them, because of course you're probably not going to understand them just by listening, they talk about things like aliens and otherworldly kind of gods and deities and things like that. Not necessarily in a religious sense, more so in like aliens from another, planet or universe or something like that kind of influencing humanity or something along those lines. You have the history of humanity discussed to some extent here, which is to be expected given the album's title. You also have a healthy dosage of death injected to the lyrics on this thing too, which once again isn't all that surprising given the genre that we're talking about. It's literally called death metal. Death in the lyrics makes a fair bit of sense. And while, like I said before, you're probably not going to pick up on the lyrics on your first few listens of this thing just by listening to it, probably because, it's death metal. Death growls are kind of hard to understand just by listening, but after reading through the lyrics to this thing, I think they pair up really nicely with the sound and the aesthetic of the rest of this project. As I mentioned previously when discussing the sound of this record constantly sounds like it's coming from some sort of otherworldly plane. You have this very creepy alien atmosphere to it that I really enjoy. The lyrics pair up really nicely with this. These song titles reflect this too. The album artwork to this project too, which is fantastic, I should say, matches up really nicely with this as well. Overall, the aesthetic and the vibe this album tries to give off is very meticulously constructed, and it comes together to make a really cohesive and enjoyable record. Overall, as I probably made clear by this point in the review, I think this is a pretty fantastic album. The performances on this thing are fantastic. They're detailed, just technical enough to feel, really interesting and vibrant, but not overly technical or anything quite like that. They still sound very visceral and nasty too, in a way I really like seeing in death metal. The vocal performances on this thing are very nasty and aggressive as well. The lyrics here pair up really nicely with the soundscape created on the rest of the project. Overall, it's just a really fantastic and enjoyable death metal record, which, if you're a fan of this genre of music, you should certainly give this album a listen, even if you haven't heard anything from this band prior. You don't really need to hear their previous material to enjoy this new album here, but you should certainly check out that older material as well, because, like I said way earlier in this review, it's worth hearing as well, but I still do think that this new album here is the best thing that the band has made so far. Of course, they're still a fairly new band. I still think that it's possible for them to top it at some point in the future, but hey, for right now, this is a really fantastic album. I'm really happy with what I got here, and for metal fans, this is a must-listen in my opinion. But yeah, overall, that was just my thoughts on this project. If you happen to disagree with my opinion, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave your own opinion on this record in the comment sections down below if you've heard it. And while you're down there, make sure you also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content, things like album reviews, track reviews, things of that sort. If you enjoy that kind of content, make sure you subscribe. Thank you for watching once again, and stay golden.